Thank you very much, Mercedes. It's a true pleasure to work with you here, too. I very much appreciate that kind introduction. I want to get right to the topic. The topic can be very harrowing and very sad, but we also feel that since it is a nonpartisan issue in search of bipartisan solutions, we feel very emboldened that under this president's leadership, we will be able to tackle the three major challenges when it comes to the opioid crisis, which we call the crisis next door. And those include prevention and education, law enforcement and interdiction, and treatment and recovery. And those are not meant to be done sequentially at some time to be designated in the future. They're meant to be tackled all at the same time. Right now, as I stand here, roughly 116 Americans are dying every day from an opioid-related death. Think about that, 116 a day. From 2015, where 52,000 people died from drug overdose, to 2016, the numbers went up to 64,000. And sadly, those numbers may get worse before they get better. We didn't get here overnight, and we won't be able to change this overnight either. But at the same time, with the president's commitment in that October 26th address by the president and the first lady, when they both tackled the policy part of the opioid and drug demand crisis in our nation, since then the president has directed his entire administration to take action. And indeed, it was a call to action for the whole country. So what is being done and how can we help? As we travel around the country, we meet different types of people who are affected in various ways. Some, of course, have lost loved ones to opioids. Others are successful, give us their successful stories of treatment and recovery. And those are very heartening, and we've met with them firsthand, and then they take their successes and they try to help others who are in need. We also meet with law enforcement. We meet with DEA agents. We've met with healthcare professionals, faith-based leaders, folks all across the spectrum of responsible individuals. The reason we call this the crisis next door is because when you look at the statistics alone, you recognize that opioids is affecting everyone across geographic, demographic, socioeconomic lines. Truly, no state has been spared and no demographic group untouched. What is really searing about the opioid crisis is the rapidness with which the use and the overdose and the deaths has occurred. The CDC last month released its statistics showing that there's a spike up in these deaths, but many of them are being induced by something called fentanyl. That's a synthetic opioid, and that is responsible when it is laced into a pill somebody is taking, or whether they're taking the drugs through a different means. Fentanyl-laced deaths they're really what's spiking up. And I think that we suffer from information underload in this country when it comes to fentanyl and synthetic opioids such as that, and even illicit use of legal drugs. Fentanyl, of course, is 50 times more lethal than heroin, 100 times more lethal than morphine. And it is, with the information underload, means that just this past November, this administration put out a one-pager on safe handling or proper handling of fentanyl for our law enforcement officers and for others who may come in contact with it. But in addition to that, what we see is as particularly challenging about the opioid crisis, and we, of course, have had drug demand in this country for many years, but with opioids, it's very tricky because often it starts in the family medicine cabinet, and on that label of that tiny bottle bears the family doctor and the local pharmacy. And so that was meant to help someone somehow in some way. And that either becomes very tricky for folks who are otherwise persuaded it can't hurt me because it was meant to help mom, dad, or grandmom, or my friend's mom, or they're using that as a cover, as a mask for non-adherent use of somebody else's prescription. But the good news is, whether it's through increased funding, increased awareness and coordination, here at the White House we have what's called an opioids cabinet, where we literally meet on an ongoing basis just to coordinate the dozens of programs that already exist across a dozen or so agencies and departments. And that's everything from the interdiction piece like DOJ and DHS to the treatment and recovery, HHS, VA, for example, and then certainly prevention education, Department of Education. We also see a role for Department Department of Labor for Housing and Urban Development, because we recognize that first we need to destigmatize so people feel free to come forward and say that they do need help. Taking away that decreasing stigma and increasing awareness and education are incredibly important to the success of this effort overall. In addition to that, we recognize that some people who are lucky enough to get treatment, go through recovery, are then looking for housing opportunities, skills, training, jobs, and such. And so we're trying to tackle the individuals who are affected, and indeed the entire crisis next door, all at once as such. How does it affect women particularly? Well, women tend to disproportionately be the healthcare consumers and the healthcare providers. And if you look at opioid use overall, women are more likely to take a prescription opioid than men overall. You see a doubling in the number of Americans who sought out emergency room treatment for opioids, and that includes women. But also, since women are disproportionately the healthcare providers, and the healthcare consumers, they're seeing it from both ends. And it is affecting them, but that also gives them a heightened sense of responsibility and, in fact, skill and opportunity to help bend the curve in the right direction. And so we're very, very hopeful about that. Just last week, the President signed into law the Interdict Act, and I thought it was a great example in the Oval Office of a bicameral, bipartisan way to show America that there can be agreement on this issue, not to put petty partisan politics in the way of progress. And so we had Democratic and Republican House members and senators standing with the President as he signed into law the Interdict Act that had to do mainly with fentanyl handling. Recently, the Department of Justice announced its first new DEA office opening in Louisville, Kentucky. We haven't had one in 20 years in this country, so it will be there. And also to designate in each U.S. Attorney's Office a special opioid designated individual who will help with this. Also, we're trying to work with those who are charged with curriculum and educating our youth that they're worth more than a pill, that they can be somebody, not a statistic. And in that regard, our First Lady has taken on this issue in a very bold way. You heard her remarks on October 26th, and prior to that, I had the privilege of traveling with her to West Virginia when she was on the ground at a center called Lily's Place, which helps with neonatal abstinence syndrome. These are our newborns increasingly being born dependent on opioids and other drugs. That has quadrupled pretty much in the last several years, the number of newborns being born dependent. And so there are many different ways that we're going about this. I also just wanted to point out that recently the Health and Human Services gave clarification on the HIPAA laws, and I think this is already going a long way to saving lives and mitigating unfortunate circumstances. Essentially, we have encountered so many families across this country who tell their story of their son, their daughter had been resuscitated 5 or 6 times, but that last time he or she were too far gone. But the parents literally say, I didn't even know he had a problem. I didn't know she was using. And I know some of those bold stories are here right with us today. And thank you for your courage and for sharing and for being on the front lines and helping other people to avoid the same circumstances as we come together. Yes, thank you very much. But basically what HHS has said is that there are circumstances, crisis circumstances, that give healthcare providers broad ability to share information with family members in those crisis situations that would not violate HIPAA. The IMD waivers that Administrator Verma's office are reviewing and issuing have been incredibly helpful. Most recently, I believe Utah and New Jersey, adding them to the list. I think we're up to 8 now, 8 states that have an IMD waiver, and the administrator can explain more about that. But essentially, we don't want the number of people who could be treated in a facility where beds are available to be enumerated by the number of beds, meaning you can't get Medicaid reimbursement if you have more than 17 beds. So we're really trying to get it in that way. Also, NIH is doing some groundbreaking work, as are some of the private companies, with respect to developing non-addictive opioids. We recognize that pain management need not mean pain medicine for all Americans, but for many Americans, they do rely on pain medicine. And that's not what we're talking about here. Essentially, we're talking about the sports injury, the surgery, the dental procedure, where the individual is offered a 30-day supply of prescription opioids and doesn't necessarily need them, and it becomes a gateway to other behaviors, and certainly for some full-on addiction. We also recognize, as the President made clear on October 26, many people are already in treatment, and that needs to continue as well. But we need that education and prevention piece as well, so that we're telling our youth, but really everyone. And lastly, I would like to say that we've been incredibly heartened by the response literally from all over the country. For people who didn't vote for the president, don't bother to vote at all, don't care much about the political process, they see this as an issue where we can really bend the curve on behalf of our brothers and sisters across this country. We've talked to the major sports leagues, we've talked to the tech companies, we've talked to philanthropic groups, we've talked to corporate America, we've talked to small business America. Nobody has said no. Everybody has come forward and has wanted to help. And so part of what we're doing now is just trying to organize all of that, find out what the best practices are to carry forward, where are we duplicating and not replicating, and really to continue to hear from the brave men and women on the front lines. More often, brave women on the front lines who are willing to help as well. So as we do that, we would like to call upon you too to help. There's really a place for everyone. And finally, I'd like to say that we are developing a dedicated website here at the White House where people will be able to share their stories. And we think that the president went first. He shared his story about his brother Fred, who passed away at the age of 42. And he shared that story spontaneously in his own words on October 26th. We'd like the rest of the country to feel comfortable to share their story too, whether it's triumph and treatment and recovery, sadness and loss and grief, whether it's a healthcare professional, law enforcement officer, anyone at all. This is the crisis next door, and I think that when people look at folks in their neighborhoods and they say that I like you and you are like me, it gives them the courage, really, and the courage and encouragement to come forward and be part of the solution. Thank you very much. Administrator Verma?
Thank you, and thank you, Kellyanne. You've been an inspiration to many women, and we appreciate all of your hard work. Well, I am so proud to be here today and honored to serve the American people and an administration that is truly committed to women's health, families, and children. That leadership is advancing the best ways to help those in need by making a lasting difference in their lives every day. So a little bit about the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, commonly known as CMS. At CMS, we have a number of programs, and we serve over 140 million Americans through the Medicaid program, Medicare program, and products that we have available through the exchanges. In our Medicaid program, we are serving pregnant women and children, disabled and the elderly, some of our most vulnerable populations. And with the Medicare program, we're also serving the disabled and our senior population. But it's not about the 140 million people as a whole, but I like to think about it in terms of the individual. From my perspective, I just had a recent scare, a family health scare with my husband having a heart attack. And it really gave me some perspective about what patients go through and the things that they face when they're having to deal with the healthcare delivery system. It's not easy to navigate the healthcare system. What doctors do you pick? What treatment options work best? And how much is it all going to cost? These are issues that all Americans face, and at CMS, what we want to do is empower patients. We want to make sure that patients and families and women who are often making the healthcare decisions for themselves, their partners, their children, and their parents, that they have the information and the tools that they need to make the decisions that work best for them. We want to get Washington out of the way and return the decision-making about healthcare to individuals, people, and have that interaction occur between patients and their doctors. So, a couple of things. One of the other things that we're doing at CMS is making sure that our programs are modernized to deal with the changing evolution of technology and innovation in the healthcare industry. And as Kellyanne said, we're also trying to do everything that we can to respond to the opioid epidemic. For all of this, for all of us, this can be very personal. And for me, I remember just a few years ago when my daughter was only 13 years old, and we attended a funeral it was a kid in her class, and it was her older brother. And like so many kids, he had gone in for just a routine surgery and become addicted to pain medications. And I remember the funeral and the words of Audrey, his sister, who was only 13 at the time. And she talked about the anger that she felt at her brother for getting mixed up in all of this, and the tragedy and the heartbreak in her voice as she talked about never being able to see her brother again. So this is a personal issue for all of us, and we're trying to do everything that we can at CMS to address this issue. We're very appreciative of the President's leadership. Because of his leadership, HHS declared the opioid issue a public health emergency, and it's allowed our agency to take immediate action. As Kellyanne referenced, one of the things that we're doing is making it easier for states to provide treatment to individuals facing opioid addiction. One of the things that we found is that when people are ready for treatment, we want to make sure that that treatment is available. They don't want to hear that there's a waiting list or that there's not a bed available for treatment. And so we've gotten rid of, or we're allowing states to waive certain laws that prevented individuals from getting treatment. And it was really heartwarming for me to go to Utah, state of Utah, where we had approved one of these first waivers to allow for individuals on Medicaid to seek treatment in certain types of facilities. And they were actually, they had construction going on because they were expanding the treatment center because they now know that they can serve individuals. They don't have to worry about a 16-bed limit. And I also was able to travel to New Jersey, where I got to meet a woman named Vanessa. And she had been facing addiction. She wasn't able to get treatment because of the IMD exclusion and not being able to receive services at a certain facility. And she ended up in jail. And ultimately, she got out of jail. She got clean. She was able to get treatment. And now she's spending her time helping other individuals get the services they need and providing a resource and support. So victory is on the horizon. We know that we can address this issue, and there's stories like people like Vanessa that we hear about that are inspiring to all of us. So again, appreciate the opportunity to be here and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Well, these are the untold stories. This is the type of progress and work and commitment by this administration and by President Trump. Now we'll turn to the women on the stage. Want to introduce just a couple of women on the stage. Pam Bondi is with us, who's the current Attorney General of Florida. Thank you, Pam. Rebecca Clayfish is the current Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin. And Catherine Burgum is the First Lady of North Dakota, who has been working on these initiatives for fighting addiction in the North Dakota communities. Before we turn to the questions from the stage, I would like to take a moment to introduce a special guest who has been working hard every day to lead the charge to empower women and all Americans. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Hello, everybody. Sit down, please, please. I wasn't very far away, so I said I'd love to do this. This is fun. But I want to thank you all and really for the job you've done. I know Ivanka just left. We really appreciate it. It's been incredible. You know what we've done in our tax bill, and you know how successful it's been. And we had women front and center. I think you all know that. But I'm honored to stand here with the women across the administration, from all across the administration. They have been incredible. I just look, and our Kellyanne has been something. Everybody up here. There's Pam Bondi doing such a great job in Florida. We're proud of you, Pam. Everybody up here has been a friend and very, very special. I want to thank First Lady of North Dakota, Catherine Burgum, for being with us today. Catherine, thank you very much. Thank you. Lieutenant Governor of We're doing okay in Wisconsin, that's for sure. It's a great place. And I also, Pam Bondi, again, we want to thank you, Pam. Thank you very much. To Arkansas, great state. How did I win Arkansas by so much when she came from Arkansas? I don't know. Something going. But Leslie Rutledge, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate it. Chairwoman of the Republican National Committee and in charge of our campaign in Michigan. And when we won Michigan, I said, I got to keep her going because Michigan hadn't been won in decades. And so Ronna McDaniel, where's Ronna? Ronna's here someplace. Thank you, Ronna. Great job. Great job. Thank you. And you're representing everybody very well on television. I love your appearances. But women represent half of the population, but they care about 100% of the issues that face the nation. That's for sure. We're making incredible progress. The women's unemployment rate hit the lowest level that it's been in 17 years. Well, that's something. And women in the workforce reached a record high. More women in the workforce today than ever before. That's really terrific, and especially since it's on my watch. I feel very proud of that. I have to tell you a statistic that just came out recently, as you saw, that the black unemployment rate, the African-American unemployment rate, is the lowest it's ever been in the history of the report. So we're very honored by that. It's really a great thing. We've enacted massive tax cuts. You've seen it. You've seen what's happening. I have to tell you that far beyond our expectations. We thought on February people would start to see their paycheck have a little more money in it. And, you know, you pick up that extra $200 or $300 all of a sudden on a monthly basis and sometimes on a weekly basis. That has a big impact. So we thought it would be February. And little did we know when the company started, AT&T started it, but these companies started giving out $1,000 to everybody. All of a sudden, it was one after another. Now, the few that haven't, they're all saying, the employers are saying, what about us? So you know that's going to happen. So it kicked in a lot faster than we thought. But the stock market is way up again today, and we're setting a record literally all the time. And I'm telling you, we have a long way to go. And had the other side gotten in, the market would have gone down 50% from where it was. 50% from where it was. Remember that. It was stagnant and it was going down. And all you have to do is look at the GNP from the beginning. Just take a look at that GNP. And you look at it, if it's, you know, any way you want to look at any statistic. You could look at GDP, you could look at any statistic and take a look at where they were. But GDP in particular, it was stuck and heading down. And we took off restrictions, we took off regulations, and we still have plenty of regulations, although we're cutting a lot of them too. But you don't need... You don't need 9 different regulations. We're looking now at Dodd-Frank because we have to free up so the banks can loan money to great people, because the banks haven't been able to do that. They were restricted. A person came up to me at a recent stop and said, you know, all my life I did business with a certain bank, and now all of a sudden they can't do business with me. I've always paid my debts. I've always paid my loans. The bank loves me, but they're prohibited from doing. Now they're going to be able to do business with that person again. So we're doing a real job on it. But the regulations had a lot to do with the success. Don't let anyone kid you. Without taking off those regulations, I mean, look at what we've done just in terms of pipelines, 48,000 jobs from almost day one. 48,000 jobs on really things that were never going to get built. They weren't good. We have plants all over the country that are getting built. Toyota's now moving back. Mexico, it's very interesting. Chrysler is leaving Mexico and moving back to Michigan. That's, you haven't heard that one. You haven't heard that one in a while. And one of the important things we're doing, as you know, doubling the child tax credit. And that's something so important to all of us. So women-owned small businesses in America will now be able to deduct 20% of their business income, which is something that people didn't expect that they would be seeing. My presidential budget was the first in history to include a nationwide program for paid family leave. And we're partnering with communities to end the scourge of drug addiction that has plagued our country. I mean, you talk about a problem. That's a problem that we are working very hard on. Pam has worked very hard. Everybody here, even if they're not totally involved with that, they're all working hard on it. And some people within the family themselves, unfortunately, they're really working because they have people within the family that are in trouble. So that's number one on our list. If you look at what's gone on, there's never been a time like this. And it's a worldwide problem. Some areas take care of it through very, very tough measures. We don't. We're not prepared to do that, I guess they say, as a country. But we have a tremendous, massive drug problem and drug population, and we have dealers all over the country, and we are hitting them hard, the dealers. The dealers are being hit hard, but what they've done to families and what they're doing to the country, and it's something that we are very focused on. Whether it's the opioids, whether it's drugs, as you hear in the traditional sense, much comes through the southern border. You know that. People don't like to talk about it. They say, oh, why do you mention that? Because it happens to be true. But they come in through many different places and means, and they come in many different ways. But we are on the drug problem as much as you can possibly be on it. And we're going to get it taken care of one way or the other. And frankly, the tougher we get, the better it's going to be, the faster it's going to go away. We have got to get really tough on that problem because it's eating away at the heart of our country. So with that being said, I just really appreciate you all being here. It's an honor. Again, when I heard, I ran across the street. Now I'll run back. Now I'm going to run back to the Oval Office. But we really have. We've made a tremendous amount of progress, and it's now 11 and a half months, and we've made a tremendous amount of progress in a very, very short period of time. When you look at what's gone on with the employment, when you look at what's gone on with the stock market, we've created now almost $8 trillion worth of value just in the stock market. That's not mentioning all of the other things that there are. So we have a country that's on the right track. We're working on immigration and immigration reform. And hopefully at some point we'll be able to solve that problem. If the Democrats really wanted to, they could, but they really sometimes don't want to. But we're working on it, and we'll get it done one way or the other, I hope. So thank you all for being here. It's an honor, and I will see you all soon. So many friends. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ron.
Okay, you all can go home now. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Kelly Sadler will kill me if I say that. So we'll move over to, well, that was quite a treat, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It really is such an honor to work for the president and be part of this team and his commitment every day for American families. And with that, want to turn to our women on stage.